everyone. I wanted to take some time to talk about the book that I wrote, Silhouettes of Abuse. So, some people think that this is just such a sad book, and in some ways it really kind of is. But it's also a book that helps you know that if you're going through a hard time, you're not alone. And it's also kind of a way for survivors of domestic abuse to get across that, it can get better. It can. All of the people that I interviewed were survivors of domestic abuse in one way or another, and there's a lot of different kinds of abuse. There's child abuse, and there's spousal abuse, and there's elder abuse, and there's financial abuse and emotional abuse, which emotional abuse pretty much goes along with everything. And then there's physical abuse, sexual abuse, so many different things that can happen. So I thought I'd share a little bit of one of the stories that's in the book. Today I want to talk about Rachel. So Rachel, I interviewed her. She's a woman in her 60s, extremely bright, very caring woman. She raised a wonderful family. She lost her husband, and she lost her mother shortly after that. It was hard for her. But she sat down and talked to me a little bit, and so I wanted to just read to you an excerpt from the book, from the interview that I did with Rachel. Rachel's father was in the Army Air Corps and a boxer. He was a widower at a young age, his first wife dying from a nosebleed. He met her mother, a very vibrant woman, when she was in the USO working in Washington, D.C. They married and had 4 children. As long as Rachel can remember, her dad was violent. With their mother's recent passing, Rachel and her siblings have been reminiscing about their childhood. Each of them remembers things differently, but they all remember that they learned not to ever be in a room without 2 doors. Rachel's older brother, who never admitted before that their dad had been bad, questioned out loud for the first time if maybe he had killed his first wife, that the nosebleed that killed her had been from a beating. Rachel's sister remembers that during one of the beatings their dad was giving their mom yelled, "Are you going to kill me like you did your first wife?" Rachel's sister also recalled a violent fight their parents had. They had 2 couches in the living room, and Dad kept throwing Mom from couch to couch. Mom yelled for the girls to go get help. The 2 little girls, aged 5 and 6, ran out the back door to go to the neighbors. They were met by their older brother, who was 7, who tried to stop them. He didn't want their dad to get in trouble. Rachel remembers that he was the one their dad hit the most, but yet he always protected him. The girls struggled past their brother and eventually made it to the neighbors, who called the police. In the meantime, Dad had grabbed Mom's leg to pull her off the couch and twisted it brutally. From that day on, Mom suffered with knee problems. Mom was about 37 years old at the time, so she dealt with knee problems from that incident for decades. Rachel does have fond memories of long family card trips, but her sister recalls them as tense and stressful. She remembers that Mom and Dad fought the whole way and that no one was allowed to talk because Dad wouldn't allow it. They remember other things about him as well. Rachel recalls that when her younger brother was around 10 or 11, Dad would say that he had a lisp, but no one else thought so. The boy got to the point where he refused to talk about anything at all around Dad because Dad would point out the supposed lisp and would not let up on him. Dad called Rachel Babe the Blue Ox from the Tales of Paul Bunyan because she was heavy. Dad would call Rachel's sister the dingbat and said that she was book smart and common sense stupid. Dad was constantly calling her older brother stupid. He received most of the abuse from Dad outside of Mom. They owned a service station and her brother worked there with Dad. Dad would backhand her brother and call him stupid, even in front of customers. In spite of this, no one in the community believed their father to be a harsh man. In fact, quite the opposite. People would say that their dad would give anyone the shirt off his back. In some ways, this was true. He would give away gas or an oil change to anyone with a sob story, even though they really didn't have it to give. He just didn't have the same reaction to his own family. So this little part of Rachel's story, there's quite a bit more to it, but it does show you that abuse in a family can be abusive to the mom, it can be abusive to the children, it can have long-lasting effects on the children. These children, they were 5, 6, and 7 when that story about mom being tossed back and forth from couch to couch, and her knee getting wrenched and having problems with her knee the rest of her life. That story happened when they were 5, 6, and 7. And these kids still remember that in their 60s. So this domestic abuse has this really long-lasting effect. Now, sometimes we see people that have been domestic abuse survivors, they struggle all their lives with their emotions and with relationships. And in this case, Rachel didn't have that. Rachel, while she did have her struggles in life, she married a wonderful man. She raised a wonderful family. She was a wonderful parent, supportive to not just her family, but her friends and coworkers, and she's just a really good person, and she never let it affect her. However, other members of her family are still affected from that abuse. They have anger issues, and sometimes they're abusive to their family members, and it's been hard for Rachel to look at that. So if you want to know more about Rachel, or if you want to know more about some of the other people that I interviewed quite a variety of people for this book. So there are, conventional relationships, unconventional relationships. There are stories in there about men who were abused. Yeah, women are not the only people who are abused. Children are not the only people who are abused. Men are too. And so I feel like it's a book that really, I wanted to write that book because I wanted people to be able to tell their stories, because we often think that domestic abuse happens to other people or not in our community. But there's a lot of it out there, and we don't see most of it. It's not something that you see, out in the middle of the street. It's something that goes on behind closed doors, and people don't talk about it, and people don't want to hear about it because it's sad, but it's important. And I do talk about some of the things that martial arts can do to help with that, but honestly, mostly this book is about their stories. And every single one of the people that I interviewed wanted to get their story out there, even though it was hard for them to tell their story, so that they could help other people. So let's get the word out. Let's try to stop domestic abuse. And if you're interested in the book, you can find it on Amazon. It's Silhouettes of Abuse. I know this looks kind of backwards because, well, I'm doing selfie mode here, but it's Silhouettes of Abuse. And my son did the cover art. I think it's awesome. And like I said, you can get it in Kindle format and also in paperback. And I hope you enjoy it. And if you have comments, I would love to hear them. Thanks so much. Have a great day.